This man abandoned his loyal dog. What happened next will make you cry. Dogs are some of the most loving, intelligent, and emotionally engaging animals on the planet, so being able to own a dog is an incredible thing. But for one dog called Rex, things were turned upside down when his owner abandoned him at the side of a quiet road before driving away forever. But it's what happened next that's so extraordinary it will melt your heart. Rex lived with his owner since he was a tiny puppy. In fact, Rex was so small that his owner even had to teach him how to eat and drink and where to go to the bathroom. He had taken Rex on his very first walk and watched as the golden retriever puppy ran happily around the park, sniffing the grass, chasing other dogs, and making new friends. As Rex grew, his owner always brought him toys and treats, and they loved to play together in the garden before flopping down on the sofa together to watch TV and fall asleep. So Rex thought nothing of it when his owner ushered him into the car. He thought they were just going on another fun adventure, maybe to a park or field, or maybe to meet some new friends. That certainly would be fun. They drove for several hours, and Rex happily watched the world fly by the window, savoring the new sights and smells as they traveled. Eventually, they pulled onto a small, quiet street, and Rex's owner reached over and clipped a leash around his neck. Excited to be getting out of the car and going for a walk, Rex went to lick his face, but he was roughly pushed away. He thought it was strange, but didn't think too much about it. His owner exited the car and walked around to the passenger side, opening the door and allowing Rex to jump out. The owner took hold of Rex's leash and walked him several meters to a street light pole that was cemented into the ground. He then proceeded to tie the leash to the pole, tethering Rex to that one spot, unable to move away from it. Then, without so much as looking at Rex, the owner stood up and walked quietly back to his car, climbing behind the wheel and speeding away from the scene. Rex was confused. Was this a game, like the ones they used to play back at home? Was his owner going to fetch something, like a toy or some food, before coming back? Rex wasn't sure, but his tail continued wagging in excitement and anticipation. But 1 minute turned to 10 minutes, and then that became an hour, and then 2, and then 3. And still Rex remained there all alone, tied to the pole. His tail slowly stopped wagging as a sad and sobering realization settled upon him. Maybe he was never going to see his owner again. Perhaps he had been abandoned. Rex quietly whined to himself and looked around. Only the occasional person passed by and didn't give the dog a second glance. Similarly, several cars had driven up and down the street but paid no attention to the dog tied to the pole. Being alone didn't suit Rex at all. He was a friendly and sociable dog and loved to be around people. But it started to dawn on the poor dog that maybe people didn't like to be around him. He laid on the ground, sad and gloomy. Out of the corner of his eye, though, he caught sight of a young woman walking towards him. She was in her late teens and listening to her music, but there could be no doubt that she had noticed the dog tied to the pole in front of her, too. The girl glanced at Rex as she passed, but carried on walking, making sure she kept out of reach of the potentially dangerous animal. Letting out a small whine, Rex laid down again, sure that he would never ever find someone to love him. But suddenly the girl stopped. She slowly turned around and gave the dog another look, pulling her headphones out before slowly approaching him. Nervously reaching out a hand, she went to stroke his head, gently making contact with Rex's head. She started rubbing her hand up and down his body. And for the first time since his owner had driven away, Rex's tail started wagging again. Realizing the dog wasn't dangerous, the girl looked around for poor Rex's owner. There was no one to be seen, though. She even waited an hour to see if anyone came to retrieve the beautiful dog, but no one came. Night would fall soon, and she knew she had to do something to help Rex. She tried to untie his leash, but found the knot to be far too tight for her to undo. She didn't even have anything to cut or snip it with. Thinking fast, she grabbed her cell phone and made a call to her best friend. She'd know what to do. She told her where they were and instructed her to bring several items to help pour Rex out with. While they waited for her friend to show up, the girl took photos of the scene as evidence for the police. It was a cruel and nasty thing to abandon a dog like that, and she would make sure that she filed a report and submitted her photos as evidence. Even if Rex's owner couldn't be found, at least police would be aware that things like this were happening to poor, defenseless animals. Within 10 minutes, the girl's friend had turned up in her car. Running over to the scene, she gave Rex a lot of fuss and cuddles. He was certainly enjoying all the attention, and his tail was a blur as it wagged without stopping. The friend had brought a blanket to keep Rex warm, as well as a water bowl and a large can of food for him to drink and eat. Rex gladly tucked in and lapped up the cool, refreshing water before sitting on his new blanket and watching the girls struggle to untie the knot. After several long minutes, it started to come loose and finally fell free of the pole. Rex jumped up, happy to not be tethered anymore. The first girl decided that he needed a small walk. She had no idea how long Rex had been tied up to the pole, and she knew that he must have wanted to stretch his legs a little bit. She was right. Rex happily pulled her along as they walked up and down the street. But darkness was starting to fall, so they returned to the car to discuss their next steps. The two friends were unsure of what to do next. Do they take him home? Do they allow him to wander off and roam free? Do they call a shelter and let them come and take him away? One glance at Rex's happy eyes, and the answer was clear. He was obviously a loving dog and had a lot to offer and a lot of love to give. He was ready to fill someone's life up with love, and in return, all he wanted back was love too. The girl smiled. She would take the dog home and keep him for herself. She had longed for a pet, but never actually gone out and got one. She was always too worried about not being a good owner, and thought that when the time was right, she'd know. Well, it seemed like fate had stepped in and introduced her to Rex, and this was the sign she had been looking for. Bending down to look the happily panting dog in the eye, she made a vow to love and protect him for as long as she needed to. She wouldn't carelessly abandon him as his old owner did. She wouldn't hurt him or make him feel useless or unloved. The girl would care for him every day and give the gorgeous golden retriever the life he truly deserved.